Okay, got a couple more people. You can click on the profile in the top right if you want to add a profile picture. Click on the chat icon below there if you want to introduce yourself and let us know what you're excited about from today's fireside. And we'll get the ball rolling here in a couple of minutes. I'm really excited. Okay, I'm getting some more. Oh, hi, Chris. It's nice to see you. Hi, Phil. You're welcome to set up your profile. Introduce yourselves in the chat if you want to. This is going to be a pretty intimate event, so we might as well get to know each other. Let us know why you're here, what you're excited about, what you're eating for lunch, any of it. Oh, Paul's here. Okay, very excited to have Paul here. He has quickly rising in the ranks of some of our insider MVP status. Paul, go ahead and add a profile picture if you want to. Update your profile in the top right corner if you're interested in having all that visible. Hello, everyone. Okay, very excited. All right, I'm going to give it 3 more minutes. So if you want to chat amongst yourselves in the chat, grab a cup of coffee, grab whatever it is that you need. We're all really excited to get started. This is a new format. We haven't done this before. So it's really exciting to, you're here for a watershed or a groundbreaking moment because we're hoping that this moves forward. Waiting until after this meeting for lunch. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I am too, but that makes sense because I'm probably going to be talking a lot. It wouldn't look great for me to be doing that while, stuffing my face with a sandwich. Oh, that sounds great. I wish I had leftover Thai now. Okay. So I think we might as well dive in because anyone who, Phil, hi, Phil. I'm remembering which Phil this is now that he's added his profile information. I'm really glad that you came. Okay. So we might as well dive right in. This is a TechTO Insiders event that, it's the first time we're trying it out. It's called HustleStruggz. And this month we're going to talk about making first hires. So the goal of these events moving forward is to have one of them, every month and pick a theme that has to do with, common challenges when it, comes to starting up a new venture and getting it to a point of funding and scaling. And so we wanted to talk about, what are the relatable challenges that happen across the board, especially regarding, building that core team and making a few first hires. So I will just dive in. And as I just kind of mentioned, it's a fireside forum. So honestly, even since the last time I mentioned this idea during the first event that we had a couple of weeks ago, I guess now, I had intended for it to be, a panel of mentors from the insider group and a panel of challenge presenters from the insider group, and that didn't happen. So we completely changed and pivoted, and now we're doing fireside forums, which I think is going to be more conversational and enjoyable anyway, especially when it's an intimate setting like this. So let's just see how it goes, and y'all can message me on Slack or on email if you want to change it up next time. But it's a first draft, so we'll see how we go. So next, I'm going to introduce a little bit about the insiders who will be joining me on the main stage to have this chat in a couple of minutes. So first, I'll introduce Ross Saunders, who is the PrivSec director at Bamboo Data Consulting. And Ross has grown up in multinational startups, managing technical, consulting, product, and infrastructure teams over the course of the last decade. His experience includes hiring top performers into highly agile teams, often in rapidly changing SaaS environments. And in 2019, he released a book for technical specialists that are moving into the management space titled "This Is Not What I Signed Up For," a survival guide for first-time managers. And we will link that in the chat shortly as well, so you can check it out on Amazon if you want to order a copy. As I mentioned, he's currently the PrivSec director for Bamboo Data Consulting, which is a niche Toronto-based consultancy in the governance, privacy, and security space. And I'll bring him up in a second when I also introduce Mo. So Mo is finding success as an entrepreneur after establishing a strong track record in the corporate world, where he led marketing and sales teams at top multinationals like Unilever, British American Tobacco, and Nestle. In 2012, he took a leap of faith with his first venture in the startup world by co-founding More Limited, a loyalty and rewards program. Since then, he's led and or partnered with businesses across the UAE, Egypt, KSA, and Canada. And in 2020, he founded My Courier Inc., a Toronto-based last-mile delivery company that supports e-commerce businesses such as Amazon on their journey to send joy through the unboxing experience. So everyone start clicking on the applause buttons, because I'm going to bring Ross and Mo up to the stage to join me. Yay! Very, very excited to have you both here. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for the introduction, Laura. Hi, Ross.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Very good. So before we dive into the fireside questions, I know that those are the official intros that I got from you, but is there anything else that you would want our audience to know about you before we start diving into the fireside?
I think a lot of it will come through as we're going through the discussions.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, because we usually read the bios and it's the good side of the work. But the back end is usually, as working in any startup, is your phone number is a 911. Whenever there's an emergency, it's like, quickly, let's find something happening. So I'll say the second job I have is a dispatcher for a 911 for emergencies.
Oh my gosh. I think yesterday was like 911 dispatcher appreciation day. I have a friend that I went to high school with who does that job now, and I cannot even imagine what that job would be like. But
correct.
I digress. So literally, let's make this into a literal fireside. Where am I going here? There it is. Okay, so we're just going to chat by the fire for the next 15 minutes or so. So first question, and either of you can jump in if you want to go first, but are either of you hiring right now? And if so, what are the positions that you're looking for?
From our side, we've actually just fulfilled the core team, so that's kind of the space we're at the moment. So not at the moment, but watch the space.
We have one role for hiring, which is a business development specialist, and we have the description, or the job description is on LinkedIn. If anyone is interested, it's quite an interesting role.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll probably chat a little bit more about that. I'm wondering whether or not anyone will have questions about it later. Throughout these questions, also add comments, questions into the chat if you want to. But if you want to wait and keep your questions until the end, we will open up an I want to join the stage button if you want to come up and join us and actually chat with your camera or audio. So next question is a little bit more general and talking about the topic of, making first hires. What are your main priorities when you're hiring for positions on a core startup team? What is it that you're looking for?
Chloe, do you want to dive into it?
I can go. Okay, so I usually when I look at any hire, there are three things that I try to zoom in: their knowledge, their skills, and the last one, which for me is actually going to be the first, is the attitude. And jumping in a startup in general, the attitude of a growth mindset is super important, because the ambiguity and uncertainty that is in a startup is up there. And if a person jumps in and he doesn't have this attitude of, I have this can do, I'm willing to learn, even outside of my core scope, it becomes very challenging for them and also for the company to be able to take it forward.
Yeah, I'm totally going to second that. That comes down perhaps in different words to one of my prime things that I would look at as well, and that's someone who doesn't have this is what I'm doing and I'm only going to do that. There's no such thing as, that's not my job. It's you've got to get in there, you've got to muck in, you've got to pick up the box and run with it, and your job is going to change daily with this kind of thing. So I mean that, and I think looking at complementary skills, not necessarily the same skills. Sometimes it's very easy to look for skills that match your own because this is my dream kind of thing. But you don't want to end up with a case where everyone agrees with you on a bad idea. I like to look for someone that can be complementary but also challenge.
Yeah, and I think that it's so important, like, someone who's ready and willing to change lanes, so to speak,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So next question.
And just to add, sorry, Laura, just to add one more thing might be when interviewing, it's quite easy to know the knowledge and quite easy to know the skills. It's actually the attitude that sometimes we don't dig so much in it, but it's not that easy to know in an interview. And maybe even one question I would ask the audience here is, how would you pick the attitude from an interview? How will you say, you know what, yeah, in this 1 hour that I sat with this person, I'm able to gauge a bit, he has the right or she has the right attitude, or nope, it's not there.
And so it takes like a degree of emotional intelligence as well in that interviewing process, outside of just looking for the skills that you need. It's a feel, it's a feeling, I think. And I think that's, another thing that, we can go down the rabbit hole of how hard it is to interview with working from home with distributed teams, but sometimes, and anyone can add their experiences into the chat if they want to, but it can be harder to spot those qualities that you're looking for when you're not necessarily in the room with someone. So with that in mind, what are the sourcing methods that you found to be most successful in spotting, these qualities and these skill sets?
For me, probably word of mouth and referrals from trusted advisors, trusted people that I've worked with before. I think those first spaces and steps that you're in, that goes a long way into knowing who you're dealing with and getting a lot of that feel for someone's attitude and all of that, because then you can get that third party validation on someone that might be coming in.
Fair enough. So value networking. Well, you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree also on the referrer, but I will add also one more thing. It depends on the level of the hire itself. I mean, if the hire is quite junior or it's not a managerial role, then I would say that you can afford a trial and error. So you can afford, for example, going to a staffing agency or a hiring agency and trying out a couple of people until you start feeling, yeah, this is the right values together. But as it goes higher up in the rank and it's someone that strategically you need to be on your leadership team, or even as a starting manager, I think referral, and what Ross said is quite well. Referral is important. And sometimes referral from inside the company will be even better because eventually they know the values of the company. So they will be like, yeah, we feel this person will fit this style of work or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's really powerful. So networking, number one, is a great thing that obviously TechTO has kind of created a brand around, trying to help people connect with each other. And I've said before, like I found my last 4 jobs through networking connections that I've made through TechTO and through the referrals that I've been able to get through there. So, I'm living proof of being able to work through that pathway and trying to, because I've rarely had success just applying to a job board and hoping for the best. So I think that it's really strong to do that. And then also, yeah, with the more junior hires, in TechTO Talent tomorrow night, for example, we're going to have University of Waterloo talking in a breakout room about how to kind of create a co-op program, because that can be a really good way to try trial and error, I guess, to find a good value fit. So I guess if those are some of the most successful methods that you've used for sourcing first hires, what would you not recommend doing for finding candidates?
I think I've got one that'll be a caveat to it or a catch to it. So, I totally agree with what Mo said around, depending on the level you'd have something. And if I had to, and I don't want to make this as knocking third-party recruiters, but I found the least successful, it's often been third-party recruitment where there is not a relationship with the third-party recruiters. you get very different styles of recruitment companies out there, where you'll have the companies that will build a relationship with you. And it speaks again to what Mo was saying with that value that you have. You need to speak to the values of the business, and it can be very hard if you just are having candidates put forward unless you have a relationship with that third party. So I think that's probably my space where I would come in there and say that that's been least effective. The referrals have generally been better. But, referrals can also backfire as well. So we've seen it with trying to reward referrals internally. So you refer us a successful candidate, you'll get X amount. Sometimes you get some terrible referrals from that internally when you're starting to get better or bigger, and you end up interviewing more terrible things, and it affects your program and the trust in it as well.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think?
Usually when we hire within any startup, you're hiring not with a full plan at the beginning of the year. Usually it happens when you start feeling burned out and I need someone to really help here or there. So the eagerness to hire is really fast. My recommendation and things that I fell in is, because I'm so eager to hire, sometimes you would hire the first person you meet. You're like, you know what? I did an interview. You convince yourself, yep, they fit. Yep, they have everything. You're just literally trying to put it in your mind because you really need someone that fast. My recommendation would be, take your time. It doesn't mean that because it's the first person you spoke to, it's the right person. Again, maybe yes, but do take your time. Don't rush the process, because eventually this is like marriage. It's someone that will be with you for a couple of hopefully years, and you're building this relationship as you go. So to build the relationship, have your time to really dig deep into the person's values, to really dig deep also on the values you're looking for. Because sometimes jumping in to just hire someone, you look at the technical side and you forget that there is the chemistry, there is the emotional side. You're going to be seeing this person every single day. Would you like to have a leftover Thai lunch with them or not? Keep this in mind.
Exactly. But it's so funny, because it reminds me of when I was a recruiter and when I was working for, and I was trying to do business development for the recruitment firm that I was with. And I wanted to try and partner with startups, because I was getting involved with TechTO, and I thought, oh, startups are really exciting. But as far as third party recruitment is concerned, if you're going to an early stage startup, it's just much, much, much harder to find people that align with the values, and it isn't just a matter of sending them a whole pile of resumes. They really don't want the spaghetti at the wall approach. And so it was kind of fascinating to me when I was sitting with these companies that were, it had just kind of gotten their core team, and they'd just gotten through maybe a round of funding, and they were, starting to source wider for more roles, and yet they were like, we don't think a third party is important. We just think we should find a talent acquisition person and make it their full-time thing to make sure that they find someone that fits the profile of the kind of person we want to bring on board, and the kind of person that we want to retain. Because that's the whole other side of things, is how do you retain the talent once you have them, especially these days. So I guess that kind of leads a little bit into my next question, which is, how does hiring for positions on a core team differ from hiring to scale after a round of funding? What really is the main differentiators there?
So for our side is, we didn't yet go into a funding round, so we're all self-funded internally. So hence the strategy for our hiring is the same. But if I would assume that when you have the option, you might actually start putting different type of compensations. When you're having a funding, your compensation level or the brackets that you can offer the talent could be a bit higher than the normal, or let's put it, could be the market value that is there. So eventually you would have a pool that is different than if you're at the beginning and you're just simply using your own bootstrap type of compensations to the team that will be coming through.
Yeah, I'm going to add on that and go on a slightly different angle and refer to what you've been saying previously, Mo, around the values and things like that. I think, when you've got the core team and then you've hit the funding and you're hiring sort of the teams going forward, when you're hiring that core team, you're still looking at the values. I think, and you need to look at the values all the way through, but you've got values, you've got culture, and then you've got how the business works. So when you're getting that core team, you're forming the culture by means of the values that everyone has. So it's very important to find those values up there. Once you're beyond that stage and you're moving into scaling, I think you're more finding people to fit the culture. And that's where I think the culture fit comes in, as opposed to a value fit, if I can split the two up a little. So there is a little bit of a different route there. But again, I'll echo what Mo said, and don't rush it. You want to move quickly and you want to scale, but you want quality as well. And you're going to have times where you have 3 absolutely fantastic candidates for a role, and it's the case of choosing the best person for the role. And it feels horrible saying no to 2 good candidates, but there's always down the line as well, and there's going to be a knockout in that kind of instance.
It's like the best kind of problem to have when you have 3 perfect candidates. It's a hard decision to make, but you got to get creative with which one you want to go forward with. And it's kind of just a hoping for the best situation. So I want to actually flip to a question that I see in the chat from Phil. And he's asking, how would you recommend that remote companies source good candidates when they don't really have a network across geographic locations? So I just wanted to bring that up, since I know both of you have experience, working with and managing multinational teams. So, what are your experiences with trying to recruit across geographies?
Okay, I can jump on here. Is that if you don't have connections and referrals, which is what we had spoken about, which is normal, I would say the second best thing you can do is check your competition in the region that you're going to be in. So knowing the competition and knowing what caliber of people in this would help a lot. We see a lot of times that people would be headhunting from competition juniors that are ready to take a bit more of a senior level, but in their own company, they are not yet offered this sort of seniority. You might come in and say, I'll give you the seniority level and I will take the know-how that you would have, or the geographical know-how that is there. So LinkedIn could be part, TechTO could even be part of it, that you can know what are the different competitions, or even doesn't have to be direct competition. It could be an upstream or downstream for the industry you're in, which you can also pick from.
Yeah. And I think, you also, depending on the role that you're going for, you don't necessarily have to look at the traditional routes that you want to look at. With everything having been remote for a while now, and we've been working in remote teams for many, many years. So the beauty of being in the software as a service space is it wasn't too new to move remote. But there is networking in groups like TechTO where you can start getting introduced to certain people, and you can already start seeing people's involvement in associations and professional bodies and things like that. And generally you'll get a feel for someone's go-getter attitude as to how involved they are in an association. But there's also alternative sourcing means. Like, go look at people's GitHub. Someone could be based in any country in the world, but they've got their GitHub profile available. You can see what kind of coding they do. You can see what projects they get involved in. And it's a different sourcing location that you can actually get a good feel for people.
It is so funny. When I just kind of like to harp back to when I was a recruiter for a hot minute a few years ago. One of my fellow recruiters, who's now an amazing talent act person at a startup, who's like head of people, but she would literally just message people on Facebook, and she would like look at their Instagram feeds and see like, oh, they like The Simpsons, and so she'd like message them like a GIF from The Simpsons. So it's also just kind of appealing to personality and appealing to that culture fit, because again, there's a lot of challenge when it comes to these amazingly talented individuals who, probably get 100 messages from recruiters a day, in some cases, in some instances. So it's, how do you make your brand and what it is that you have to bring to them stand out as well? And so kind of thinking creatively and appealing to personality and appealing to sense of humor sometimes. Okay. So we're going to jump back into our questions, which, goes down a bit of a different path, but, would love to hear some of your red flags when interviewing someone for a core team. What are the kinds of, I don't know if there's buzzwords or maybe what are some of the situations where you're just like, ugh, that it gives you that ick factor?
The shouting out loudly because I'm amazing kind of thing. And I've had that twice and made the mistake once.
Fair enough. So overconfidence, would you say, maybe?
Overconfidence, but also you need to get a feel for the context that someone's saying something in. The one that it was early on that I made the mistake of, someone was just going on about how amazing they were in literally that wording. They kept on making the joke, oh, well, because I'm amazing. And it was appealing to humor and things like that. And everything looked up and up and like it was going to work really, really well. And that person really wasn't amazing. And it fell flat in the end. So it's a degree of overconfidence, but overconfidence can blind you into not asking more probing questions, I think. And I could have asked a lot more probing questions to learn that.
Well, that's a really, really, really good point. Mo, do you have any thoughts?
It starts with if the person is really prepared for the interview or not. I mean, I have people that I met, literally, they didn't even read the website of the company before coming. And I was like, for a moment, I'm like, okay, so are you really serious? Or are you just simply coming because you had 10 minutes and you want some entertainment in an interview? So I think it's super important, the way they are prepared, reading the job description and trying to connect their experience or their aspiration. Maybe you don't have the full experience, which is okay, but you have some sort of aspiration to really dig more into this role, read, connected, and just purely be a storyteller in the interview. So if this is not there, you just feel that, okay, maybe the person is not serious. And in a startup, if you're not serious, because I usually say in a corporation, in a big corporation, you can go on a holiday for a week and it's okay. There's still going to be sales. Things are going to still move. But in a small startup, you go out for an hour, the whole company will feel it that you're not there. So we need a serious person to really take it forward in the role.
Yeah, proactivity.
I would add to that, there is incredible value to screening interviews, where you ask just very basic questions in a 5-minute little screening call. But, if someone, and with that screening, just a catch to it is, schedule the screening call like you would schedule any other meeting. Don't just phone someone out of the blue with it. But if someone can't make that appointment, or they don't answer the phone, or they're in the middle of driving or doing something else, or you wake them up, which has happened a few times before, that's probably not the candidate for you.
Probably not. You learn a lot through that process, I guess. But you're right. It's really important to, I respect calendars a lot. And when someone, put something in their calendar, I really have a high expectation that they'll show up to the call. And it's disappointing because it also wastes your time, right? And then it's hard to have that person come back to you and say, oh, I'm so sorry. But it's like, oh, well, I sat there and I waited and you weren't available. And so it's hard, it's like you end up with a bit of a bad taste in your mouth, I guess.
Yeah, and losing 5 minutes on a screening is much better than losing an hour for a full-on interview.
Yeah, that's true. So very important to set up those kind of early attitude checks, vibe checks, so to speak, to see, okay, is this person going to be prepared when I do invite them in for the hour?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so anything else to add to that one before we keep trucking along?
No, I think and maybe we'll talk about it a bit later, but also that, depending on the role you're bringing in, I'm very much more look at past experience as opposed to skills necessarily. Skills can be learned, and perhaps that ties into a bit of one of the questions that was in the chat here. Skills can be learned and taught, but you really want to look at what's coming into the role. If you've got a role that's going to be heavy in leadership, then maybe define what your red flags might be up front as well. So if someone is leading a team that you expect high churn in, you want someone who's got experience in teams that churn, and they can handle that kind of role, and you should define that.
Yeah, resilience is very valuable, especially for an early stage venture. And you learn more about what you want through finding out what you don't want in real life, right? Or by knocking down the doors and figuring it out yourself. So I think that's really valuable. I'm going to skip over one of our questions just because we kind of have already talked about it already. So we'll move into talking a little bit about negotiating. So, when you're at that stage and, you have someone that you really, really want, what's the most important thing to be flexible on when it comes to negotiating? And maybe as kind of a factor of that, talk about when would you start talking about salary versus like the full compensation package in that, in that interview process. How early would you want to bring that up before you kind of get to that negotiation phase?
Do you want me to start, Ross?
Either or. I've got some thoughts on this one as well.
Go ahead.
I think when it comes to the negotiation, don't forget that the negotiation is two ways, and it's not like you don't have to give all the ground. Someone needs to understand where they're coming into and things like that as well. Having too much or giving too much upfront can end up being a liability a bit later on. Or offering far too much money because someone's got these amazing skills, and then 5 years down the line, after a 10% increase every year, it's an incredibly expensive liability to potentially have. But you need to know that negotiation is both ways, and it needs to be reasonable. Speaking of red flags earlier, if I have someone willing to negotiate too low with me trying to come in for a role, that also makes me worried as to why are they trying to take this role if this seems far too low, where someone comes in like, oh no, I don't need that much of a salary, I'm here for the role. Sometimes that is true. Other times that is because I need to move from one city to the other and I see this as a stepping stone for it. So it needs to be reasonable on both sides. I don't know if that completely answers the question. I think the negotiations are different for every candidate you're going to go into, but I think my big goal would be it's a two-way street. Don't back down when you don't have to, but also have a mutual respect in the negotiation.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll add also on Ross the idea of it doesn't have to only be negotiation on salary. Value added is super important. And I think especially nowadays, you would see lots of people, especially the younger generation, they would be more appreciative for flexibility in work. They'd be much more looking at what type of insurances maybe you'll be giving to them. So these sort of value added could be, from a company perspective, not a major liability, which is, I totally agree with Ross. You don't want to put yourself into something that you're not able to sustain for a long term. But at the same time, it could be adding to the overall lifestyle that the candidate would be enjoying. They might be enjoying that, yep, I need a bit of a balance. I need to finish a bit early because I have, my gym in the afternoon that I need to go to. And this would make me feel much more productive and much more rewarded. So think of creative value added as you're putting your negotiation on the table.
Yeah, there's different kinds of demands for flexibility these days, especially after the last couple of years that we've seen. So being open and being creative when it comes to, how also figuring out what's going to keep this person long term. And that kind of leads into a question that someone's asked in the chat, which is about, what's hardest, hiring, retaining, or motivating talent. But, how are you thinking about those kinds of categories, hiring, retaining, and motivating over time when you're negotiating? Is it something that you're thinking about when you're in that initial phase? What's the long-term goal? What can I tell this person will keep this person or will motivate this person?
Correct. I mean, if I would just look at all three questions that was there, or points that were there, I think retaining is really hard, because retaining is where you actually in the relationship, and now you pass the honeymoon phase at the beginning and you're literally there into it. And how to both of us, and I say both of us, not just retaining from the company, also the individual showing or having the value added. So if the company is constantly having the right communication with the individual and managing the expectation, surprises are little. This is where the retention becomes easier, because eventually they don't feel that, you know what, when will I'll be called into the office?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be called into the office, because literally you're called every hour in the office to give you some sort of a communication or something that's happening there. I'll give you a small example. Myself and Rami, he's our operational excellence manager. He's on the call now. We were thinking of how can we put some sort of an incentive to the team that we have. Our team, our supervision team. So he came up with a very interesting idea. He said, why don't we give them a fuel card? Fuel is high. People are feeling it now. Maybe they will appreciate if we pitch in for their fuel. And you cannot imagine the way that they appreciate it, from as little as just the fuel card. And these are small things that could make them feel, this company is thinking about me more than another company I might go and work for them for a little bit of an extra money here or there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are really, really important.
Yeah, I think, the employment relationship is still that. It's a relationship. And, relationships take work, relationships take communication, and you need to treat it well. And I think, I think, Mo, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Like if you're having that open communications, you're going to have that retention. You're going to keep that motivation by doing that too. People, when left to their own minds, and I'm like this too, if I get left stuck in my own thoughts, I might end up going negative. Why is no one talking to me? And then you make assumptions that are not the case. And I think that open communications really helps with people. And something that you said there with, looking after the people that are there and doing well is very important, because it's very easy to slip into trying to maintain folks that aren't performing well. And then you neglect the star performers while you are looking after people who are not necessarily performing very well. And that's where like decision making has to come in, and making a decision. You need to focus on the star performers that are actually performing well.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very true. And it's also something that's probably more, it's a higher risk to have those kinds of folks on a core team. When there's only a couple of people, it's not like nothing spreads faster than a bad mood, is something that I kind of think about sometimes. And so when you're building that core team, you have to be cognizant of, okay, how are we going to set targets? How are we going to track, emotion and sentiment and happiness and, what we're each getting out of this relationship at this point when you're looking at it as a relationship. So I'll wrap it up with one last question here, and then we'll turn on the I want to join the stage button. So if you have any questions, we'll set up that button. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it on now. So if you have any reason that you want to come to the stage and ask a question, I'll enable the button for you. But in the meantime, I'll ask, these people that you're hiring to a core team are likely to step into leadership roles at some point. And so when it comes to thinking about, who am I bringing in, how important is it for you to be thinking, how will they hire? What is it going to be like? And do you want someone that has done everything before? Or, just kind of curious to know how you go into those kinds of, those sourcing conversations, those interviews.
Do you want to jump?
Well, I'll jump in there.
Okay.
I think a lot of it for me would actually come down to the communications, and how someone communicates and brings in that emotional maturity. You are going to learn as a hiring manager and as a leader, how you're going to still need to find your style and things like that. So I don't think you're going to necessarily see in someone's interview like, oh, this person has done all these amazing things, they'll be a great manager, unless you're already hiring for that role. I would keep an eye out for those soft skills that come into management. If you've got someone that flies off the handle for everything and that's not your company values, that's something you might be able to see up front, and you might see from experience at previous roles. What were some of the person's lowest points at the previous role, and what's their answers to that? Oh, they no one would listen to them, and it was always, those start becoming like the questions that imply what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. But I think, the ability to have that emotional maturity, the ability to listen to people and actually take it in, because that is something you're going to need as a leader. There are a number of soft skills that come into it.
Absolutely. What do you think, Mo?
I'll say expectations are super also important. What you would see most of the time is people moving either from university to companies, or corporate to companies, or family business to companies. So coming into a startup, if a person going on a leadership team and he doesn't have expectations about how a startup is run, and I'm not talking as an operationally type of running, I'm talking from an expectation of there could be lots of ambiguity, there will be a lot of uncertainty, chaos will be there. There is no share folder that you'll go on and find a template for a process of X, Y, and Z. You will be developing it along with the team as we go. So having this sort of expectations is super important, because you can teach someone on the leadership team the operational side. You can teach them the skills needed also. But if his expectation or her expectation is not met there, and they expect that things are going to be structured, or they'll expect that tomorrow morning, if I need 5 extra hires, they're going to be there. No, they're not going to be there tomorrow morning. You will actually need to draft the job description. You will be holding the hiring person to help you find it out. So these are important expectations. And the second thing I think it's important also for the leadership team is how fast can we shift gears? Problems will happen, barriers will be there. We need to literally shift gears as fast as possible, because if we stay on gear number 2, this car is not going to move as fast as we need. So quickly shift it on, make sure that we pass whatever happened, no blaming, we just move on from there.
Awesome. And yeah, I think it's almost also a good thing to ask, because we haven't really talked about it much, but it's another component of, getting to that final stage in a hiring process of calling references. Would you trust this person as a leader? Would you recommend them as a leader, having led them before? And so also it's just kind of doing that homework, I guess, before you bring them in, to make sure that they possess the resiliency and the adaptability to help grow the team in the right direction that fits with that culture vision and fits with that value vision. So thank you both so much for getting through our main questions here. We have an audience member who's going to come onto the stage now. So I'm going to welcome Phil. And Phil, please, when you get set up, give us a little check and say hi and ask your question. We're really happy to have you here.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And thanks, guys. Thanks for having me up. So hi, I'm Phil. I'm one of the founders and head of product of ShopToken. ShopToken is a crypto-based loyalty platform. And my question is, early stage startups typically require long hours and carry risk, so especially pre-product market fit. And so at this stage, candidates are typically incentivized with either above market pay when possible, or equity, or both, depending on the role, if you need really a lot of horsepower. And so in our experience, top talent is increasingly valuing more supplemental benefits and perks, so like much more than that, right? So how have you navigated this in the past?
From my side, a lot of that has been, I suppose, navigated on a case by case, and depending on how you're hiring, you don't want to be too, I suppose, divergent between two folks in a similar vein, because then benefits don't match, and that could do more damage later than good. But I think one of the things that happens around like benefits and perks is benefits and perks that actually mean something. And I think that's where there's a lot of challenge. And I think, speaking probably more before COVID, having a beer keg at the office and a pool table is only valuable for the first few weeks when someone sees it as new, and then it's just another coffee table with a green felt top on it. I think there's a lot of benefit in looking at what benefits really can help someone, and you know, there's actually a lot of very academic but valuable research into this kind of stuff as well. It's the kind of things that benefit. And I think it speaks to what Mo was saying earlier, like, you know, benefits like time and remote and things like that's one thing. There's autonomy. There are companies that are paying for completely personal outside of the office perks, wellness perks, gyms. Gyms may be like a very generic one, but someone can take up guitar lessons, and it helps them personally. Sometimes that'll be a perk that would help. So wellness benefits we're seeing a bit more of too.
Yeah, I'll also add one more thing there, Phil, is that there's short-term, long-term benefits. You can actually start thinking of, okay, how can I lock them in on a short-term benefit, on a long-term benefit. So instead of it's just simply getting what Ross saying is a coffee table for a couple of months and then they lose this excitement around it. I saw, for example, I'll give you an example. We don't need to go all the way to that, but for example, in Amazon, they would pay for an educational degree. So what they would do is you go in, you take an education for whatever, 3 years, we pay it for you. He's locked in for the 3 years with, I don't know, another 2 years afterwards. So at least he knows that this is something important for me as an individual. The company is subsidizing it and I'm there for 5 years. So it's a sort of a win-win. But again, maybe a young company would not be able to pay for an education, but there could be creative ways that you say, yeah, maybe this would lock them in for 2 or 3 years in the company and they still have this smile on their face.
Yeah. If I may jump in. Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
no,
Laura, do you want to?
No, you go ahead.
Speaking to that as well, you know, there's education and there's, say, like a 3-year degree that is expensive or whatever. I've stayed at a company because of a degree and it was some of the best learning of my life. But there's also professional bodies, professional designations, things like that. That's not necessarily a long degree, but it helps to have the hours and experience and the membership to the bodies. And that's often not the price of a degree. That is, you know, you get to join a group, the company pays for your membership, you can get designated, which helps you in the long term and that kind of thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I was just going to say is instead of the degree or the education, because sometimes when you are in an early startup and you're working long hours and you have, you know, high expectations for output, you don't want to give them more homework necessarily. Like it would be hard to think, okay, I'm gonna log off at 9 p.m. and go write a paper or complete a lab or something like that. And so, you know, I've worked at a company before where we had an educational benefit where we could choose, like we could use it at Indigo chapters and just buy books and or, you know, materials that we want to enjoy. You know, even thinking along the lines of connecting people with things like the TechTO insiders, you know, figuring out how to have a corporate partnership. Accessing mentorship is another thing that I've heard a lot of. You know, when it comes to remote teams, one of the things that people feel like they lack in distributed structures is that connection to being able to learn about the people that are working in a different function. You know, marketing and software engineers hardly ever interact these days, and yet it's really important for them to learn to each other. So thinking about ways that you can connect people within the company, connect people in terms of the long-term mentorship that they're looking at. And partnering with organizations, you know, not to self-plug, but, you know, like TechTO that help, you know, build the skills to help also fast track their leadership potential sometimes. And so there's a lot of different ways to, I guess, get creative with it.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Phil. Okay, does anyone else want to join us on the stage, or is there anything in the chat? Let me go take a look here. I haven't looked in the chat for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we can ship it over to networking so that we can talk to each other. All right, so I don't think there are a ton of new questions. I'm gonna say if there's any parting words that you want to mention before we move it to networking for a couple of minutes, Ross or Mo.
I think jump onto the networking.
Yeah,
all right.
no, this has been great. I've been good fun discussing and also hearing the different views.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Stick around if you want to move into networking, and you'll be partnered up with individuals that are in the audience here. You can chat about whatever the heck you want, but we'll keep that going for the next 10 minutes or so. Or go and eat lunch because it's lunchtime, and I'm guessing that there are a lot of hungry people. So thank you so much for attending this first attempt at mentorship at HustleStruggz and at opening up conversations that entrepreneurs need to hear from other entrepreneurs. And hopefully we'll see you next time.